podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts Radio Network, kingofpodcasts.com.
Previously on the Wrestling is Real podcast.
It's pretty clear that what they're doing right now with TNA is not where these NXT stars have been sitting around there in NXT for years when they were part of the Rainbow brand. They're not being moved up to the main roster. They're not being moved sideways.
Woo! Hey, this is the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And believe it or not, whether you like it or don't like it, learn to love it. Because you have to listen to Wrestling is Real. It is the best thing going today. Woo!
The worldwide leader of podcasting excellence. The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents The Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us.
This is episode 925 of the Wrestling is Real podcast. Thanks for joining me. King of Podcasts here, kingofpodcasts.com. If you go to the website now, along with all my recent episodes of all my programming that I do on a weekly basis, I also have for you a way for you to go and help me out in terms of donating to the program. So times get a little bit tough. And if you don't mind, if you really do enjoy the programming that I put out here each and every week, I never miss a week, and I put a lot of time into it. So if I don't do the subscriber things, I don't have merch, I don't have these other things to do, I just make it simple. So there's a tip jar, a donate button. There's several donate buttons right there on the website, and also in the description for Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, and Buy Me a Coffee. If you wouldn't mind, would love for you to go ahead and help put a little donation to the cause. I hope you'll consider that. You can do it right now, kingofpodcasts.com. Whatever you want to give, doesn't matter. If you can do it, that would be great. But that's all I can ask. It would really help out a lot. Now, the clip I just played before I started on the show here in the cold open, that is from the post show of TNA Rebellion that I did on Sunday night. And you can find that right now on the website. And on the podcast, just go back. It was an interesting conversation that I gave myself because I wanted to present the idea that TNA is just the latest, along with AAA, the AAA wrestling promotion, the latest in a line of partnerships or acquisitions that TKO Group Holdings has put together and has been part of as this change is happening. What has been this big conglomeration that is the developmental system. So we can go back into the history of what the developmental system, this farm league system, was in place. And this is the thing. So we know that Vince McMahon was never the best at utilizing some of the stars he had within this system. But there's always been some kind of a system in here for a while. Or you do what Vince McMahon has also done, which Triple H is trying to go and do the same thing, which is acquire talent from other promotions. Now, to know that the Rock and Wrestling era for the World Wrestling Federation, to be built upon that, it really had to go and do with pillaging the AWA, pillaging World Class Championship Wrestling, pillaging some of the NWA, UWF, among other organizations out there, and being able to go ahead and put up territories all over the place. So that was the conquering of the entire nationwide territory to create the Rock and Wrestling era, to create the WrestleMania, and move forward from there. AWA, like I said, all these organizations were all kind of pillaged off of. But yes, late 90s, early 2000s, you get a change where, not so much for the Attitude Era, because they had their own stars they were building from the ground up. But they would also take from other organizations, but not well recognizable or known. But the thing was, they did have stars they got from somewhere else that they did build basically organically to become big stars. There's plenty of them. Now, in the current age, since 2000, since after the Monday Night Wars, Developmental was a plan that was put in place by WWE to make sure that they had a future going forward. And prior to NXT, we had Florida Championship Wrestling and Ohio Valley Wrestling. And look, those stars that they were able to build out of there have gone a long way. If you even look at the names that we had back in those days that brought all of us here, let's just look at the talent that they had coming out of these organizations. So now, if I mention Ohio Valley Wrestling, Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes, John Cena, Dave Batista, Brock Lesnar, all came from there. And just think of the stars that are still working today. All right? I just mentioned Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton, John Cena, Batista, Shelton Benjamin, Bobby Lashley, CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, The Miz, Dolph Ziggler. They're all active. Jack Swagger has been away. Elijah Burke finished up when he was the Pope. Ken Anderson, I don't know if he's running a wrestling school. Mark Henry, who is still active, but just not in action, but like he's been on other programs, like I've seen on MLW not too long ago, and he's on Busted Open right now. Still active in the wrestling space. Psychosis, Chris Masters. And Chris Masters is still active in NWA. I believe he still is, yes. Currently, Chris Adonis over at NWA, that's right. And if you look at the other names we have here, Drew McIntyre is still here. Worked in OVW and FCW. Beth Phoenix, who has since retired. Mickie James, who is now inactive, but she's still around. Jillian Hall, who has retired. Serena Deeb, who has been off and on working over in AEW, and I believe she's now training as well. ODB, who's right now more or less out of the field of wrestling. And Aaron Stevens, who is still wrestling in NWA, and I believe he's vying for the NWA World Heavyweight title right now, in the current day. So those are the names you have that are still working today. Some of them could be 25 years ago, and they're still active. That's a lot of names to be active right now. And if you think about the current day roster of FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling, which I mentioned on this program plenty of times, I really did enjoy what they did on FCW. It was just a real easy kind of just go along. I watched it on YouTube. It was Brightside. Brightside Cable Network. What was it called? The Cable Network? I forget what it was called. But the thing was, that show was an hour long. You had it in Tampa. It's just a cool little vibe, which is really the bare bones version of what NXT would be today. Let's make that point clear. Before Performance Center, remember, we didn't have multi-million-dollar Performance Center. Before Tough Enough, all of this. Now, FCW was the area where they really had a lot of stars that came in through here, and there's still quite a few that are active as we speak. Seth Rollins came through here. After he came out of Ring of Honor, a former world champion there. Roman Reigns came from there. Dean Ambrose, now John Moxley in AEW. Bray Wyatt, until he passed away, unfortunately. Big E came out of this group. Big E Langston, Kofi Kingston, Xavier Woods, Bayley, Sasha Banks, now Mercedes Moné. Charlotte Flair, Paige, now Saraya. Alexa Bliss, Naomi, Carmella, who's now about to have her second child. Congratulations to her. And Corey Graves, Rusev, Bo Dallas, who we don't know what's going to happen to him after the YS6 and that whole disaster. Fandango, or Johnny Curtis, now he's still working as JDC over in TNA. That's part of the system, so he's still active. Those are the names that are still going on today. Still active. Look at the names we have, and still very much prominent right now on that main roster. So think about that right there. When you got Cody Rhodes, John Cena, Randy Orton, Seth Rollins, these are all names that have been around in this company in some way, shape, or form for more than a decade, 15 years at least. That tells you a lot. And that's the part where I'm just trying to figure out myself. Now, some of these might have come after the fact, but like some we're still working within. But in the NXT system we have here, especially the one that came from Full Sail, because honestly, once they got out of Full Sail, things changed. But part of it is I don't blame the fact that with the NXT brand itself, if Triple H was able to go and get the stars that he had, he wasn't using it as a developmental territory anyway. But all these other stars was developmental. And look at how many years worth of talent we've had that have been able to go and be competitive and active. And hey, some of them might not be working under contract within the company, but a lot of them did. And put a lot of their great years in the company. This is a real important point to make here. Because in the 2000s and 2010s, we had all this right here. The other side of the talent would come in through free agency. That's a lot of former WCW talent, ECW talent, Ring of Honor talent, and TNA talent. And that's what we have. So there's always been a mix of that. But then this, of course, with any good sports franchise, with any particular competitive team, you want to have a great roster of veterans and up-and-comers. So there's no doubt that the company is loaded with veterans right now. A veteran-heavy roster, which that works fine for what they might be doing right now on the main roster today because of the fact that you have these stars that, they were cutting promos and doing things under the Vince McMahon era. These are all former Vince stars. Vince made stars in many cases. But then what happens now is that we're at the point where, what do you do next to keep that roster fresh, young, and active? Because you need the future. Now, sure, the current roster of talent with John Cena and Randy Orton at the really is the most veteran right now in their 40s, both of them collectively. Then we move down to Cody Rhodes, who's late 30s. Same thing with Roman Reigns, same thing with Seth Rollins and others. So they're still in their prime, still can be in their prime. And in most areas of wrestling, that would be the prime of their careers. But again, that's after so many years of working in there in the first place. But then we go into the other area of like other stars where you need to get built to get to the future. Any good wrestling promotion has that. I want to think of MLW, TNA, NWA. They all have a mixture of new and young stars that are in there. And some of those stars could be developmental or could be enhancement talent. And they might help out in the realm of some of these younger stars and get them up and going. But that's completely missing right now within the system they have. Look, listen to Conrad Thompson and Jeff Jarrett as they were talking about the whole thing with The Rock and the whole issue of WrestleMania in the first place. And I think about the fact that they were talking about what the plans are going to be for the creative, who's in the real creative process of what they're doing. And they were already kind of like given the whole kind of idea that maybe we got a conspiracy theory going where the internal battles supposedly between Triple H and The Rock might culminate in a match, which would be really nice. That would be real fantasy booking to go and say, oh, Triple H and Randy Orton take on Rock and John Cena. Oh, that'd be a great idea. But that's one match. And so people think about these matches, think about the big pay-per-views and what they can build off of those. Meanwhile, TV suffering regularly. With AEW, they have a plethora of veterans with young stars. It's just the way you build. Every wrestling promotion does the same thing, more or less, right? ECW was like that. WCW was like that. All the other promotions I mentioned beforehand were all like that. But when your developmental system is loaded with stars that you need to go ahead and give them a chance to go ahead and move up and move forward. And when do you decide to go and do that? That's the issue I have, and I made a mention of right now. It's because we have a new wrinkle in this. So, of course, there's free agency that you're going to acquire talent. You have what you would think is a developmental system or farm system. Well, as far as I know, a farm system like it would be in Major League Baseball, they have various levels of leagues of baseball. And sure, there's talent from other areas. But eventually, like you would see, like what NBA has their G League. They have international leagues that you're going to tap into talent that could be drafted in or could be brought in under contract. Football, I guess you could say that because you have other ancillary leagues out there like the UFL or arena football or also leagues on the, overseas as well. But to build for the future of this brand and to make sure you have some stars to look forward to. I mean, you got to have some stars that in wrestling, you eventually build to the main event. We have to have stars that will make it to that main event. Right now, the main event scene is saturated. It's stagnant. It's been like that for a long time. But we do get some things that happen where we'll get some part-timers that come back, or we'll do something where something can get changed. Somebody might just get changed overnight, and we get interested in a new star. Not going to happen. You know the other names I didn't even bring in here? Of former stars from NXT? Okay, Sheamus, Dolph Ziggler, Drew McIntyre, Antonio Cesaro, or Claudio Castagnoli now, Chris Hero, Kashi Sono, Adrian Neville, Pac, Sami Zayn currently still in the company. That's a lot of names right there. They all have within this. But at least you had a developmental system. And Triple H, when he took over and was given the chance to go and start developing talent, well, obviously, talent relations and the system that was being put into place about what, and really it's after Jim Ross stuff, right? Talent relations went to a different area, like John Laurinaitis, or if it was Bruce Pritchard, whoever was doing talent relations after Jim Ross left. You try to think about the fact of who is there that, what they were trying to do. One of the directions that Vince McMahon was trying to do was, and various different things before he was removed, basically, or he got himself out of the situation because of the scandal he's still dealing with right now with Janelle Grant, among other things. Triple H was supposed to be going ahead and opening up satellite offices in other territories, in other parts of the world, so that they could look for talent, acquire, and bring them over to mold them up. For whatever reason, and the Performance Center was supposed to be part of that. And it was built out to be a reason for that. And it was, state-of-the-art, high-tech, everything was set up. You could go ahead and connect over from Stamford, Connecticut to see what's going on in the gyms and all the different training facilities and all that. Watch the rings, watch the training, watch the talent. And then we had a change where, there's other organizations they wanted to go and work with. So they had this thing with Evolve for a while now. And there have been a couple of stars that came out of that. But really, you think about other organizations always working with somebody else, right? Ring of Honor and TNA having their own separate affiliations. Ring of Honor was very good at creating affiliations with New Japan or with AAA, and they worked their way through to really utilize the talent they were able to bring aboard, right? But now we're at this point where it's a complete change. Now we have so many different things that are developmental or to bring in talent relations, talent development. There's so much now, it's a glob. It's ridiculous. So we had the Performance Center in 2013. NXT, when it was taken out of the competition model and became more of a promotion, Triple H decided to go that route. But he decided to go and do this thing right here. And look, because of NXT being successful in that initial stage, 2013 up until COVID, there was quite a bit of success from that. Prior to the Wednesday Night Wars, the very short Wednesday Night Wars, NXT was the show everybody talked about more than the main roster, because we were all talking about the stagnancy of the main roster. And then the talent that was brought on board, it wasn't so much the talent that was being created as overnight stars, as stars that were just bringing into the fold. And we got the women's movement, give Divas a chance, and all the stars we had come out of that. Becky Lynch not being even brought up in that list either. But seriously, look how many stars we still have that came from that. Alexa Bliss, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, Paige, so much. Charlotte Flair. Like, there's a lot of talent that came from there. And also for years, continuing on. Naomi, also part of that mix. But then there was a change that Triple H decided to go and do. It wasn't so much about building talent. I don't know if they were just not able to go and build the talent like they wanted to and make it work out. Because, again, they did have a lot of stars that came through, that the Tyler Breezes, the Adam Rose, where there was talent that was being made with gimmicks. And when the gimmicks failed, they fell out of favor. But still, gimmicks still worked. And you'd create storylines, you'd create characters, and you build off of that. And there was still some of that going on. We had stars like that. And there was a while that were still gimmicks being made for stars coming in, because no matter what their backgrounds were, you had gimmicks that would be attached to certain stars as well. Well, when TKO group came in, the gimmicks are being thrown away. Now they just want to go ahead and just create an athlete factory. And then some of the areas where NXT went to acquire stars, because what they really did was the NXT crowd right now encompasses the NXT crowd of, 5-10 years ago. That really encompasses the current loyal, juvenile, delusional fan base we have today. That NXT rabid crowd that would fill up the Full Sail arena, that's the crowd we have right now that grew from that Full Sail arena into what we see right now in the arenas today. They are the house show loop right now. They are the house show crowds we see right now, because they will absolutely go see shows and they will do all their chants. Because the chants we're hearing right now is exactly what you would hear in an NXT arena at Full Sail. Exactly the same thing. And it wasn't so much storyline driven. It wasn't so much gimmick driven. But there were certain things that certain stars would have that people would be really getting into. And on that main roster would never really gel really well on that transition. And that's okay. It happens. But it's interesting that they never got that connect right, because NXT stars can be brought up, and it doesn't matter if you put a package in front of them or not, because right now they don't do that. And they're still stars. People don't even know. They don't get much of a pop. Nothing. Because that's what they're doing. And instead of so much of doing more when it comes to NXT, trying to make sure you had some developmental stars, he wanted to create a third brand. So you get the state-of-the-art facility, so you can bring lots of athletes from various backgrounds. His mandate was to not just build the central hub, but expand the developmental footprint globally. So he decided to go with NXT UK. And there's a handful of stars he's gotten out of there that he's tried to go ahead and generate to be really big over here. So far, Gunther's the one star that has really stood out from there. He's dragging off to a point, but he's been injured. JD McDonough came out of that group. There's a couple. When you think about Pete Dunne, there are certain stars that came out of there. But it's like, it wasn't going to be any stars that you could really resonate that were going to go ahead and come on over to the main roster and really stand out. Like, Gunther's been a work in progress. And for the most part, he's been holding belts. Now he's going to a match with no belt involved with Pat McAfee. How's that going to work out for him? I don't know. But this is the decision he decided to go with after he loses the belt to Jey Uso. So we're not going to give him a rematch. No, we're going to just move into another feud with Pat McAfee of all people. Because of Pat McAfee's mainstream presence. That's really what it is. Logan Paul going after Jey Uso right now, that's for mainstream presence. So it's for clicks. It's for social media. It's kind of the idea they're kind of going with right now. So you get two feuds right there. Just build on that. And with John Cena, because of his popularity, the same thing goes. And if that sells out arenas, I guess that works. And then not too long ago, the advantage of having the name, image, likeness program, their NIL program, which is now WWE ID, right? To be able to get stars, various collegiate athletes, and bring them into the fold so they can eventually can become stars. Well, nobody's really come out of that necessarily as a big deal. Trick Williams, I guess, has. I'm guessing Carmelo Hayes has. I'm not sure. But there are a couple of people they have right now that could try to make something that happens. But then we have more things that are coming in right now that is just changing. Because NXT, because it became the third brand, because of what Triple H created, Vince McMahon thought, well, when AEW came into play, we're going to throw NXT at AEW on purpose, go head to head with them. When NXT was long-standing on Wednesday nights, AEW goes to Tuesday nights, NXT moves to Tuesday nights 2 weeks before, goes head-to-head with them, and also decides to go from 1 hour to 2 hours. On purpose. On purpose. NXT was made because of what Triple H created. Well, that will continue to be one of the sticks in the craw of Triple H is that his NXT product, no matter how big it was, did not bode well against a startup AEW, which is still okay. It's there today. It must be doing all right because they're still around. They still got the broadcast deal. Their ratings are steady. They're not as good as they once were before, but they got to do more to go ahead and continue to refresh the audience. I agree with that with Brian Alvarez when he said that on Wrestling Observer Radio. So you're seeing an expansion now in the last few weeks that has really changed. Honestly, this year, the expansion went way out there. So NIL becoming WWE ID. They want to professionalize the training process, have a consistent pipeline of talent ready to step onto Raw and SmackDown. But they don't have a pipeline that necessarily goes vertical, where you have stars that will be working within the organization and then move up. They don't have that right now because they're now creating detours. Okay, as I said, now we have stars that are going sideways. Okay? And we're going in a couple different directions where there's no trust or faith that any of these stars are going to really make their way up and do something. To see that NXT always has to be consistently using some stars from the main roster to come back down to work a program or a match. And then see some stars working two-way where they're working in NXT and on the main roster. Stephanie Vaquer, Roxanne Perez are two examples of that. And now we get stars that are going into other brands that they have within their mix. The latest with Trick Williams going in now for a title program against Joe Henry on TNA after TNA Rebellion. And makes the point of that where they confronted each other on NXT television, which TNA will hope that people will watch the live edition of TNA Impact, which is a live edition after, which is their first taping of a month of tapings that they're going to be doing for their programming leading up to the next pay-per-view, right? But now we also have the Evolve show that got premiered on Tubi a couple months ago. And now we have a new A&E competition series, WWE LFG. Okay, but all these right now supposedly have a stated purpose to train, showcase, scout, and competition. But the volume of talent they have processed right now, the multiple layers of evaluation, it really is just a whole lot of confusion, a whole lot of loss of direction, in my point. And there's a couple of points I'll make in here because of that. Because there is talent getting lost in the shuffle. So you have stars that, with Trick Williams, let me put this as an example. So I guess he's still working in NXT. I don't know if he's going to be permanently going down to TNA or not. Like, they could do it where TNA, obviously they're doing taping, so Trick Williams can go down there for a couple of days, do tapings with TNA, come back to NXT and work the shows live. Sure. But it's part of the thing where you're expecting people to go ahead and go from NXT and go to TNA. And for some people, they might not even go and bother to go and look for Access TV or wherever they're going to watch the show to go find out what Trick Williams is doing in TNA. So you're taking him away from the main attention of what he's doing on NXT. Because I'm guessing right now, maybe Trick Williams, we don't see him for a while. Because what are they going to have him do? Work something else here while he's working NXT? Like, the focus is him as Joe Henry. Unless they're doing something with Joe Henry on NXT and they're going to have the storyline progress on both shows. I don't know. We don't know that yet. But by doing that kind of thing, let's take a star and take him over to AAA. Any of the luchadors you have right now under contract, you send them to AAA, you let them work somewhere else, and then people won't even remember they're on the main roster. Imagine if like the LWO goes down there, or, Dragon Lee goes down that way, and then you say to yourself, all right, well, you got stars that are going to work in other promotions. So the inconsistency of them being on the main roster. It's one thing for some of these stars and other organizations. They get to work other dates because of the limited dates they have with AEW or with MLW or NWA or what have you. Or TNA for that matter. But you're going to see stars get lost in the shuffle. Because you're going to have them in a quagmire of this developmental purgatory, where they're just going to be in the middle of this developmental system, because TNA's not a move up, Evolve's not a move up, LFG's not a move up. They're not any of them. There's no rhyme or reason as to where the pipeline starts and where it ends. Where you have a totem pole, you have a hierarchy that goes vertical, straight up. No, we now have horizontalism at this moment. Inconsistent main roster preparedness now, because in the NXT environment, different production style, crowd size, match structure. Because remember, there's still WWE style that we're seeing right now on the main roster that does not apply to the NXT shows. The NXT shows, you're still seeing stars that are more or less working like they would in the indies or outside of any of this right here. Talents driving NXT might struggle with the pacing, character demands, or large arenas of Raw and SmackDown. Remember, they're also not working always in front of big crowds unless they work on a takeover. But for the most part, if they're working any NXT house shows, they're working them in Florida. They might be working a little bit in other places, but they're always smaller venues. So they're not going to necessarily get ready to be on that main roster and be ready to go. Then the redundancy and evaluation. You got a lot of coaches in all these different areas. Creative teams, programs, leading to conflicting feedback or a lack of direction, a clear direction for some talent. Because think about it. What might be talked about by the veterans that are on the LFG show, right? The new Tough Enough, I call it. Or the trainers that are in Evolve. Or the trainers that are going to be in AAA. Or the trainers that are going in TNA. They're all different mindsets, different directions, which also doesn't help in the whole process of trying to go ahead and build a star and get them in the pipeline and the system, learning and adapting to that WWE style and go up. Now, it's easier, obviously, for Triple H to go and say, well, we're going to take these stars from other organizations. Just pillage them off. They already got the work rate. They already got a presence. They already got a reputation, all this kind of thing. And then you can just polish them and make them adapt into the WWE style, which is what they're doing with Rey Fenix, with Penta, with Ricky Saints, among others. And remember, how many stars do we have that goes direct to main roster? Penta and Rey Fenix, that's a rare thing, but let me tell you, I can see where you have them on this main roster for a little bit, and then they start getting utilized in AAA, which obviously, that's when they do the When Worlds Collide event for AAA and WWE together, there's no doubt that Penta and Rey Fenix are going to be working down there. Not even a question. But then you're going to take them away from the main roster for what they're going to be doing, because they're going to be there for other reasons. And then there's the needs of the NXT roster and the main roster. So booking decisions made to serve NXT storylines and viewership, they're not going to position specific stars for an eminent or impactful main roster call-up. As we said, some of these stars are going to get some changes. Now, it used to be with Vince McMahon, you might see a complete change of a star where their name gets changed, their gimmick gets adjusted, realigned, and then they come in as something different because the main roster requires something different. So what works in NXT will not work on the main roster. That's been very clear. Very clear. But there are talents that break through, right? The PC NXT era, even during the points of, you saw stars coming in 2014, 2015, 2016, before the real pillaging of Ring of Honor, of TNA, and just taking up everybody that they could find of talent. Ring of Honor, in a bad way, they were struggling a lot, right? The Sinclair era. Same thing with TNA. They were all struggling. And there was no other place to go, so you had to go to WWE in the first place. But there were stars that did come in and weren't really recognized or known until they got their way in. So like Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair are great examples of those that really were organically brought together and pulled up to that main roster. And they've been thriving. But there's a consistency problem, and there's no immediacy, because if you have a star that is a diamond in the rough and you see something good with them, and you're not willing to go ahead and pull the trigger and say, hey, we need to get them up to the main roster. How many of those stars do they have right now that will really get that? And let's take the caveat, okay, the ones that are not second or third generation. They don't have the last name Steiner or last name Mysterio or things like that, right? I mean, they just get the move up because there's something there with them. But what happens now is that the current state of the roster in the developmental system, you now have organizations that are thriving pretty well, that are profitable. TNA looks like it's profitable. AEW is profitable. You get MLW is doing okay, and then you get some stars. They can go ahead and pick off some stars that, have no other place to go. NWA, the same thing. You have these organizations that all came out of COVID, and they found a way to go and, keep working on and doing things as they're doing right now. So they're moving on. But then we had this change in 2022. October 22, that was the rainbow brand of NXT. So the NXT brand that we knew of, black and gold, NXT 2.0. And when that came in, to the credit of the company, they've had a number of stars that have moved up to the main roster that came from this rainbow brand. Because they had, specifically, some of them had already had gimmicks to them. And it was very gimmick heavy. Of course, people complain about it. The NXT stalwarts there that are now the main roster stalwarts, they all complained. They all bitch, moan, and complain about this. They didn't like it, and that's where everything changed. So we've had stars that have not had their gimmicks stay with them as they moved up. Braun Breaker, Carmelo Hayes, Tiffany Stratton, Roxanne Perez, Cora Jade, Grayson Waller, Ilya Dragunov, Trick Williams. And there's other stars we could bring up in this whole mix as well. And it's not as if they haven't had talent they could try to pull up and do something with. So the current list right now, Braun Breaker was former IC champion. Now he's attached to the new Paul Heyman, Seth Rollins group. So making him, if they say what they want to call Dangerous Alliance, they want to call it another evolution, whatever you want to call it. Everybody's been all up and out about that. So that's the next new shiny toy. Everybody's going and praising right now, which is fine. I don't got no problem with that. Carmelo Hayes right now, he's been relegated to a jester along with Miz, which is not going to do much favors for him at all. Tiffany Stratton already got done with her work with Charlotte Flair. At least he did keep the women's title on her. I'll give her that. Roxanne Perez right now, working a lot. Taking losses on NXT and Monday Night Raw. When she was Roxy and she was a babyface and a very sympathetic, sentimental babyface, we all liked her. Now, she came from Booker T's Reality Wrestling, and she was working other independents, and then Ring of Honor looked at her and put her in there as a women's champion, and she rocked it. It was great. Like, when I saw her in Ring of Honor, I was like, man, this girl is dynamite. Now, they haven't booked her horribly in that main roster. To me, in the NXT roster. She was women's champion. But now it's like they don't have much to do with her. She's still too small. They're not going to play up against the sympathetic babyface thing right now. They don't want to do that. It's like there's something wrong with having a sweet babyface that's coming in there that's going to be really sympathetic and a crowd pleaser. They don't want to have that right now for whatever reason. Which is really what she works best. Cora Jade has a look to her. She's still in NXT, but her issue also has been injuries, which is why she has not been able to move up. Now, Grayson Waller has moved up to that main roster with Austin Theory and, kind of working out with things where they're just put together, Austin Theory and Grayson Waller, and they're just kind of in SmackDown and they're just filling a role. Meanwhile, Austin Theory was being pushed quite a bit when he was being under the tutelage of Vince McMahon, getting consulted by Vince McMahon. Whatever that worked, it gave Austin Theory a bit of a rub. And Grayson Waller had some good things going on in NXT. He was one of the stalwarts of the NXT 2.0. The Grayson Waller effect, yeah, that's all good. Definitely, they're both shit talkers. And they gave him some tag team gold. And ever since, nothing. Just sitting back there and just really not being used for much. That's a shame. If they do a draft, I would like to think Austin Theory and Grayson Waller, they would do something to split them up and put them on separate brands and let them go on singles careers. Like, it really needs to go in that route. Ilya Dragunov, he had a real thing where in NXT UK and NXT itself, somewhat of a gimmick to him. But going to that main roster and what they did with him, he could go ahead and choke out Gunther really easily. He could win match. He was the one that beat Gunther for the NXT UK title, right? things like that. JD McDonough, like how these smaller stars, Pete Dunne, that might be great wrestlers out there, might be good grapplers, but maybe catch can, but they don't resonate with main roster. So you have stars that have been brought in here, and you ask yourself, are any of them going to be main roster potential? Well, yeah, of the women, there's quite a few, because there's not really much of a rhyme or reason as to what works on the women's division. You just got just good athletes who go out there and got a great look to them, move them up. But of all these stars out here, okay, Braun Breaker standing out. He's got the size, he's got the pedigree, he's got the generational lineage with the Steiners that makes him everything they could go to get him over with the crowd. And all he's doing is pretty much kind of just taking a little bit of a flavor of the Steiners and putting it up here, which works. Trick Williams really has worked to himself well. And I would have preferred Trick Williams by now be promoted to the main roster. The TNA thing, it's not a demotion, but it's something where I don't know why they decided not to go and give him the chance to go move up. He's done everything you can do down there into NXT. And now to move to TNA, is he even going to be a TNA champion? Is it you going to take the belt off of Joe Henry? Is that the plan? Because I don't understand where Trick Williams fits in the TNA role. Unless you're permanently moving him there. But he's there just for a program. And what for? Well, you can do a program with him up until Slammiversary and that's it? Like, what is Trick Williams going to benefit going to work with Joe Henry, of all people? I didn't think they really had that much chemistry in the first place. But for whatever reason, they want to put Trick Williams in this role here, when you could easily put him up on the main roster. But the main roster, for whatever reason, there's just certain people that just can't lose their jobs. And if I wanted to go to the main roster, I could think of a handful of names that I'd prefer to go and see released and replaced with Trick Williams on that main roster. That's my thought. I wasn't even a big fan of him. Now I am. I think he's grown a lot in his promo skills and his work in the ring. I think he's ready for main roster. He should have been. He should have already been moved up. If you were going to wait for a while, fine, move him up. Roxanne Perez should not be a two-way star. She can be put on the main roster right now, but they don't feel like it. There's just no trust to do that at all. Wes Lee's been sitting down there in NXT after the whole deal with the Radicals kind of getting broken up. And they made a big deal in NXT, but he's got a threshold there. Wes Lee's got a whole lot of experience. They're not putting him on that main roster. Desmond Xavier worked a lot of work beforehand. He's been around 10 years, I'm pretty sure, right? Or more than that. So why not move him onto that main roster? They won't do it. They're not willing to do it. I don't know. I mean, Trey Miguel and TNA at least had a run as X Division champion. He was, been a lot working in the singles role. He was doing actually really well. His attachment with Sami Callihan was really good stuff. And then some of the stars they just going to work with right now that they're using, some of them are also being worked in the TNA. Because again, Tatum Paxley, Fallon Henley, Last Legend, Jakara Jackson, all worked at TNA Rebellion this week on Sunday. One of the stars I could definitely see that looks like he's got potential to go in main roster right now is Obafemi, current North American champion. The whole African tribal leader kind of thing with the oof, right? That guy's got charisma. You can move him up right now and see what he can do. And I'm sure there's some other people you can bring right now that you could just take out. This is the time of year where after WrestleMania, you get some fresh new talent. Where's the fresh new talent? There isn't. We're getting returns from veterans. Okay, that's normal. Becky Lynch comes back. Rusev comes back. But really, we're not getting any new stars to go move up. I mean, I guess you do. But really, if it's Julia or Stephanie Vaquer or Roxanne Perez, they're kind of working a two-way system. But you're not willing to go ahead and just make the move and go forward. And look at all the stars they still have here. They haven't done anything with. So Lyra Valkyria right now in a program with Becky Lynch as the Intercontinental title, Women's Intercontinental title, and now Becky Lynch is going to go after each other. That's the Backlash match, right? Elektra Lopez, who was somewhat part of Legado del Fantasma, and nothing, right? Out of Grace. Ariana Grace has been down there again. She's now on a TNA role, working with her father, Santino Marella. Kiana James, we saw on the main roster for a little bit. She's been AWOL. Never heard from her since. She's disappeared. Dakota Kai has been up from NXT for a long time, and nothing came from her. Like, she's there, but she's always been injury prone, very fragile. Tegan Knox was up there, and then they let her go. Andre Chase, NXT 2.0 days, since day one. Thea Hale, Riley Osborne, Joe Gacy, they're all sitting down here with no thought that any of them are going to move up to main roster. But do you see any of those stars right there of that 4 that are going to make their move up? No. Ava, who's not a good manager at NXT, but, hey, nepotism is something, man. When it's somebody from The Rock, yeah, go ahead and put her up there, right? Lexus King, Brian Pillman Jr., and this gimmick that he's had right there that has not bode any good to him at all. Seriously, Lexus King, I preferred him when he was part of the New Heart Foundation in MLW. Because it was just better. Davey Boy Smith Jr., Brian Pillman Jr., and Teddy Hart. That was a great group together, man. The New Heart Foundation was fantastic at MLW. I love that group. And I thought Brian Pillman was doing really well down there. Now, for Brian Pillman, it's unfortunate. They gave him a little bit of singles run in AEW after the Varsity Blondes. It just didn't work. And hey, look, Varsity Blondes, look what happened. It's Julia Hart that's the one that got the most benefit out of that whole faction, that group. Interesting. You don't want to hear this, but AEW does a better job of developing talent. Young talent and trying to build them up. Because I can think of Julia Hart and Jack Perry. Right now, Nick Wayne in a good way, like the way they're building him up right as well. Like there's a lot of stars they're bringing right now or Daniel Garcia is another great example. Like just some stars I see here, they are trying to build up and move up the ranks. MJF was also in that mix. Let's not forget. But we knew MJF was just, I knew when MJF got a chance to go and work on that main roster on AEW, he was going to just excel. And he is. Even right now, him with the Hurt Syndicate, great storyline on AEW Dynamite. Great storyline. I don't know what he's going to do right now to get into that organization or if he's going to sabotage it or what. I don't know where Wardlow is. I wish I knew where he was right now. But Powerhouse Hobbs is a big deal right now. They've been working on a Hook for a long time. Like they do quite a bit to elevate and do something with talent. Darby Allin, the same thing. With not really knowing a lot about him before you saw him get into this main roster of AEW and do something with it, right? Not to mention some of the stars they had when they were doing Dark and Dark Elevation, which was basically their developmental system. They got to work in front of that main roster crowd early before the show begins, before the main bell started, but you saw a lot of stars that came out of AEW Dark or Dark Elevation and did move up. And eventually they became stars we would see regularly on AEW television, on the main roster. Now, there are some bigger names they have in there that they're trying to work off of, right? That they want to do something more. Hank Walker, Tank Ledger, Josh Briggs, Brooks Jensen. They're all big boys. They're not moving anywhere right now. You've had some stars that they dropped off in the 2.0 era. Damon Kemp, Von Wagner. So Aruka's back down in NXT, and I think she's North American champion too. Like, I don't know. But it's all these stars they have here that you could very well give them a chance to see what happens. But part of the thing is that since they're not being given gimmicks, they're not given characters, they're not given any kind of dimensionality or anything of their story to make them interesting or unique, all we know about them is just their athleticism and their size and what their look is. That's it. That's all they're working off of. With WWE, there was a lot of times they could do something with a star that might not have had the size, might not have had the look, might not have had all these things, and they would find a way to go and make something out of them. And some of them are the most prominent stars you remember. We don't have that now, for whatever reason. And I wish there was an answer to all this, but they don't have one. So many stars they have right now on this main roster that they could be doing something with, but they're kind of stuck at the moment. I wish I knew what could be done to get them into a better place, because currently what they're deciding to do right now is just work off of current roster. Like, they have no plan to go and build any new stars and having their current mix. Like, look at the current thing right now, since the storylines right now after WrestleMania 41, right? Seth Rollins is essentially doing another Monday Night Messiah. He doesn't have Austin Theory at his side, who was an up-and-coming star they were trying to build off of. No, he has Braun Breaker. So remember, we had Seth Rollins that had the Monday Night Messiah, and he put together AOP, Buddy Murphy working with them, and then Austin Theory was also part of that mix. Now the same thing's happening here, once again, with Paul Heyman now attached to it, for whatever reason. Which is fine. And they decided to go after first was Sami Zayn. And you sandwich Monday Night Raw this week around Sami Zayn, who I've figured out right now, he's like Mick Foley. He's like the current Mick Foley, shaggy beard, dressed in flannel, kind of just haggardly, doesn't have the great looking body, but I feel like that's the role he's taken. He's just not a big slob. And he's not taking bumps as a hardcore legend. He's just not doing any of that. But really, Sami Zayn is the current day Mick Foley. Beloved underdog, always gets himself involved in other people's business and all this, right? For the greater good. And it's become what he is right now. Everything else he was doing before that, the conspiracy theorist, that's the last time I really cared about, like, paying attention to this character. As some of his work with Kevin Owens, obviously, where it was against each other or as tag team partners, that was fine. I mean, Sami Zayn for a while was like in good shape when he came in to NXT, and then he got apron bombed by Kevin Owens, and all that was great stuff, right? Like, you've got some stars also. Like, these are both guys that have been around for a long time as well. Same thing goes. Sami Zayn now trying to work his way to become, he says he wants to be world champion. All right, well, this is like, what, more than 10 years after he got on the main roster? Been out there for a long time and never decided to put the belt on him, but they've gotten some of their belts on him before, and that's it. Always the fighting champion. That's what they feel like they're going to do right now with this anyway. We talk about Jey Uso and Logan Paul right now. That's a match they're going to have. Pat McAfee and Gunther. That's another match they're going to set up as well. That's what they're going to plan to do. And then John Cena and Randy Orton. So you get to build up a show in St. Louis for Backlash. That's their plan. If that's what you want to do and that's what you want to build up on, all right, fine. So you built a pay-per-view coming up in about 9 days as I record this to build off of, to make something of. And Lyra Valkyria and Becky Lynch. All right. These are all ideas they have right now. And of the current crop, Lyra Valkyria right now is the only young star that you're trying to build more off of. They got something in it for her. I don't know what it is. What they see in her that makes her such an ideal star to work with. But I guess it's because Becky Lynch worked with her and brought her in. Fellow Irish wrestler. NXT UK star, brought her up to into the NXT roster and have done her things with her. Fine. But it's like, what are we doing next with all this? Because right now, as we said, Braun Breaker, he's part of this new faction, but where are the other stars that we have in this mix right now that can be done something at all? Like, there's not any young stars we're talking about right now necessarily for the future. At this time of year, we normally have that, but we don't right now. And you can only live off of the legacy of what you've already done. But I look at this system right now. We don't have a straight shot to the main roster. We have detours. We have forks in the road. And I said this before. If you're not in the company to become world champion, then what are you doing allowing yourself to be subjected to go into other organizations, whether it's Evolve or TNA or eventually AAA, or if New Japan gets bought by WWE as well, what are we doing then? Like some of those international stars might benefit well from this, but where's the main roster? Where's the focus of the main roster? Why are we focusing on everything else? Hey, the main roster right now, you might be selling out, getting excellent gates right now. You're selling out every show. You're making more money than ever, hand over foot. You got the broadcast deals that will keep you safe and sound, but the future is not being considered. It's being squandered right now. We now have a developmental purgatory. And there are potential headliners that are right now in the mix that could be moving up and really doing something with themselves in the future. But at the moment, they're nowhere to be found on that main roster, and they're not doing anything right now in a positive sense to move them into something bigger. But anyway, we'll figure out what they're going to do. We'll come back next week for another Wrestling Observer podcast, because wrestling needs us.